Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today we have a new hot location, and for those of you that don't know or maybe are new to the game, hot locations appear once a week and are here for one day only. They typically will shift and shake up the meta quite a bit because they have a 60% greater chance of appearing in every single game on that day. And so today's hot location is Titan. 6 cost cards will cost 1 less. And so maybe this means that you just run 1 additional 6 cost card in your list to be able to drop additional 6 cost cards onto the board. Or maybe you're like me and you build a deck list that has so many 6 cost cards that it is absolutely ridiculous. Okay, and starting out, there are so many ways that you can build around this location. You could run several 6 cost cards. Maybe you just run a wave. Just running a wave, if you drop it on turn 5, will allow you to drop 2 6 cost cards on the board, but it will also allow your opponent to drop 2 6 cost cards on the board. So if they are running a deck that has several 6 cost cards as well, because they are preparing for the Titan location, then they will be able to get the upside as well. So take that with a grain of salt. The other way, and the way that we are planning on enabling our 6 cost card drops, is through Electro. So this is going to be a really high power, high cost deck list that operates largely around either Electro, Storm, or Wave. And so for those of you that are counting at home, yes, that is 7 6 cost cards in a deck list. I think that is the most that I have ever ran. I've ran 5 several times, maybe even 6 once or twice, but I don't think I have ever reached the point where I ran 7 6 cost cards in a singular list. And so running through the deck list really quickly about why I included each one in this list. First up, we have Sunspot. Sunspot is going to be a good way to drop a card, and then if we need to pass a couple of turns so that we can naturally drop the Infinite on the board, he will be able to absorb that energy and retain that upside instead of it just being lost. And then that is where our low cost cards kind of stop. Our next card is Electro at a 3 cost card. His on reveal ability is give +1 max energy, and then the ongoing effect, you can only play 1 card a turn. So typically in Electro ramp decks, you want at least 1 or 2 high impact 5 cost cards to be able to drop the turn right after you drop Electro. But what we are leaning into is the fact that we're going to have our 6 cost cards all technically cost 5. So if we ramp with Electro on 3, we can actually drop a 6 cost card on 4, on 5, and on 6. And then next up we have Storm. Storm is in this list, so if we don't draw into Electro, maybe we drop her on 3, we play Jubilee on 4, that pulls into any number of our 6 cost cards, even if it's not a good or high impact card. We still have a Dr. Doom that we can drop later in the game to push power sideways. We also have an Arnim Zola that can be used to destroy a card, and an Odin to re-trigger Dr. Doom. We have a lot of ways to push additional power into that stormed lane or that flooded lane so that we can continue to push power and win that lane even after it has been locked down. And then next we have Wave. Wave is going to be kind of the second enabler in this deck list. If we don't draw into Electro, we can drop Wave on 3, we can drop Odin on 4, re-triggering Wave. That's going to lead us into 5, where we can drop a 6 cost card, and then on 6 we can also drop another 6 cost card. And then we have Jubilee. Jubilee in this deck list is going to typically have really good cards that she can pull into. One we have to be cautious of is Destroyer. So we don't want to drop a late game Jubilee once we already have high power cards on the board, but I will explain what the Destroyer is doing in this deck a little bit later. But Jubilee typically will hit a pretty high power target, and so if we do end up following up a Storm lane with a Jubilee, we can almost guarantee that we'll have a pretty good impact in that lane. And then we have Arnim Zola. Arnim Zola is going to be great for enabling us to skip a turn, play Infinite, and then push 2 more Infinites onto the board after that point. And then we have Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is going to add 5 power Doombots to each other location. He's going to be a great way that we can impact more than 1 lane, even though we have the restriction, if we dropped Electro, of only dropping 1 card per turn. We have Odin. He's going to be able to re-trigger things like Wave, Jubilee, Dr. Doom, even maybe Arnim Zola. Magneto, for some reason, may need to be re-triggered, all of which are pretty decent targets, and I think earn him a spot in this list. And then we have Magneto. Magneto is going to add a little bit of disruption for us. So if we drop Storm on 3 and they follow up on that next turn with a 4 cost card, Magneto is going to be able to pull that card out of that lane so that we can pull power out of the lockdown lane. They can't redrop more cards to later push power there. And then otherwise he's just a big high power card that we can drop on the board. Then we have Giganto. Giganto is, well, giant. He's going to have 14 power, which is massive. If we play him on the board naturally, we can only play him in the left location. But if we pull him with something like a Jubilee, then we avoid that restriction altogether. So most of the time, we won't want to play any large resources like our Storm in the left location so that we can leave that option open for ourselves if we draw into him later on. And then we have Destroyer, which kind of feels funny in this deck list. But he is here to kind of avoid some potential leader plays. Sometimes we can counterplay their leader with a Destroyer, or if we drop Electro on 3, on 4 we can drop Destroyer, which will then kill our Electro and allow us to freely drop multiple cards. So maybe they wave on the last turn and they can drop 2 6-cost cards, but with Electro we could still only drop 1. This will allow us to remove that negative Electro ongoing effect of only being able to play 1 card per turn. And there are some games where maybe we counter a leader and make them destroy their whole board, and then we just kind of chuckle all the way to the cube bank with our newfound win. And then lastly we have Infinite. Infinite, whenever he is reduced down to 5, gives us a lot of flexibility in play. It's a lot easier to skip a turn 4 to be able to drop him naturally on turn 5. We can then copy him with an Arnim Zola on 6, or maybe we do some other play on 6, but we can drop him early and then kind of play around him after that point. But that is the rundown of the deck list. We are going to go ahead and jump into a few games. I hope you guys enjoy. For our first game up after drafting our deck, we have AZ Nan DYC. We have AZN Andy C. There's a couple of ways that I can pronounce that, and I'm not really sure which one is correct. And so if I mispronounced it and you're watching this video, please leave a comment. Let me know how you typically like your name to be read. And so we don't have our Electro, but we do have both Wave and Storm here. So we may have the potential of doing some pretty big power things on this last turn. And then the last location is actually Wakanda. Which is kind of unfortunate. And so do we want to storm a location this turn? Do we want to do a wave, which will allow us to drop a Destroyer on 4? We can always use Arnim Zola later, potentially. You know, I'm actually going to storm this middle. No, I'm going to go ahead and wave. I don't know that we drop Destroyer because it will just, so they end up storming instead. I don't know that we drop Destroyer because it will destroy our wave, and it would have done whatever popped out of X Mansion. But since we don't have that luxury, maybe we do something a little bit different. We could always do Giganto. We can later on do an Arnim Zola, which will push that Giganto here and here. We could do a Dr. Doom. Later we could do an Arnim Zola, which would push Dr. Doom here and here and fill up our board with Doom bots to make sure that we have a decently high impact. And maybe that's the play. That would be on average of what, like 20 power lane? Slightly under 20 power, which feels a little bit underwhelming, right? So I think here we're actually going to just follow up with a Storm into Clintar. That feels bad too. So let's go ahead and drop our Destroyer into the flooded location. If we need to drop a card into Wakanda and then hit it with an Arnim Zola next turn. Oh, so they hit us with a big Juggernaut, which does push our Destroyer into Wakanda, which is kind of unfortunate. Even if we hit this with an Arnim Zola, it will re-trigger here first, and then the one that triggers here will kill this one. So it's not a great upside for us. And then we don't have any great way to push additional power onto the board. Maybe we do something like a Storm here, Storm Sunspot. Either way, it's going to get destroyed. I think we're going to take a gamble and hope that 16 power in the middle and the right lane is enough. Because Arnim Zola, unless they have fixed it, I know that they are working on this interaction, but how it will work before is that even if it can't destroy the card, it would duplicate it. I think they're working on how that interaction works, so I guess we'll see firsthand if that is how it turns out for this game. Okay, and so they use a Ghost Rider to resummon their Infinite, so that's huge. That is an awful lot of power in that lane. So we are going to do the Arnim Zola. It should trigger here first and then here, so that the one that pops up here should be the one that remains, I hope. But we will obviously see. And so let's go ahead and lock this in. We're not going to snap because this, we don't know if this is still how the interaction works, or anything like that. And so the Arnim Zola, we'll put it in the left lane. That destroys those cards. That is fine. It then puts it in the flooded location, which kills the one on the left, which is exactly what we needed. It leaves the one in Wakanda. So we do, so we do win with the double destroyer play. Super weird way to start out this video. No featured location, no Titan, no Electro ramp, just some destroyer and his destroying ways. Let's go ahead and jump into another one and see if we can kind of keep the momentum and the luck going. All right, so next up we have Crimmy. And we do have our Electro in our starting hand. We also have the Infinite in Arnim Zola. So we may potentially want to do something with that. We may also do Destroyer on 4. I don't know yet. I don't know if we're going to pass on 4 so we can drop Infinite, or if we play the Destroyer so that we can then start dropping our other cards naturally. And I think it may depend on what we draw into next here. Okay, and so their first card is Adam Warlock, and that is a very spiffy looking Adam Warlock variant. I enjoy that one very much. Let's go ahead and play our Electro here. That'll allow us to next turn drop our Destroyer wherever we want, really, but it will most likely end up being in Hell's Kitchen or in Hala. And then on turn 5 we'll drop Giganto and Hellfire Club. We may potentially hit that with an Arnim Zola on the last turn to generate more power in Hala and more power in Hell's Kitchen, but we'll just have to see kind of how they play their cards and how that lines up. Okay, and so they did drop a Lockjaw. So they may end up trying to cycle cards. Ooh, actually, I think... Do we try for the high roll here? Oh, never mind. So I am sorely mistaken. I was under the impression that Titan was out on the board, even though it is not. And so our cards do not cost 5. They cost 6 still. And so what we're going to do is we are going to pass on turn 4. We are going to go the Infinite route so that we can drop Infinite onto the board on 5. And then copy him into the other 2 lanes on 6, which I think should be a pretty good way for us to lock down the win. They also did destroy our Electro by having more power in Hala, which allows us to drop more than 1 card if we need to. So we'll be able to do 2 cards on 7, 1 including the 1 power Sunspot, which is not huge by any means. All right, and so we are going to play the Infinite into Hellfire Club. I don't want to give them any free power or any free draws if we can stop it. And so they drop an Iron Man there. So actually that gives me a pretty good incentive to move him into these other lanes on this turn, right? Because if they drop big power here, that's going to be hard to compete with. And maybe with the Infinite here, they do pivot, but I feel like an Iron Man is a large amount of power to invest. Maybe they do their Devil Dino here, at which point we're going to have our Infinite here and here, and we're going to kind of laugh all the way to the win. Ooh, no, so do they extend the game with a magic? If so, that feels kind of bad. We kind of made our plans a little bit transparent. Yeah, so they do extend the game with magic. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. It is what it is. So now what we can do a Magneto in maybe the left or the right lane to try to pull their Lockjaw and their Ironheart if they're going to try to cycle this last turn. Or we can do a Dr. Doom, which will push 5 power here, here, and here. But what I'm thinking we should do instead is do something funny like an Odin, which will then re-trigger Arnim Zola, which will then destroy our Odin to move him here and here, which would push 16 power on the board instead of something like 14. And I think it would help elevate our win condition in these 2 lanes. But it would just depend on if they had a Shang-Chi. But they did retreat, so they didn't have a way to come up over that massive power level that we had with the double Infinite once they had already dropped their Iron Man, which is the biggest way for a deck like this to easily push a large amount of power late in the game. All right, next up we have Mega Mat. And in our starting hand, we have our Sunspot and Storm, which is going to be potentially pretty cool. Mirror Dimension is pretty unique with a storm or flooded location in that it doesn't lock it down that following turn when it copies it. It does 1 additional turn afterwards. And then Kiln locks down a lane too. So we can guarantee that that all of the locations will lock down by at least turn 4 or 5. which I think is pretty funny. And for the hot location, supposedly being hot, I haven't seen it once. This is 3 games in. We are still 2 for 2 so far. Let's see if we can keep that going. We are going to drop Storm into the Washington, D.C. lane. Next turn, Mirror Dimension will either pick up Kiln, which will mean all 3 of these lanes. Oh no. That means all 3 of these lanes will lock down after this next turn, or it will pick up the flooded location, which means we have 1 additional turn to play into cards after that point. Okay, and so they drop a green goblin into the mirror dimension, which feels pretty bad. So what it turns into, okay, so it turns into the flooded location. We do have 1 additional turn to play cards, which we're hoping that we pull into our Jubilee. Our Jubilee is going to be really the biggest way for us to push large amounts of power. Let's go ahead and snap. Maybe we can scare them into retreating here, because they shouldn't really have much power to push by this point, and they may not realize that they can play cards into this far left lane next turn, because the text is pretty confusing in that. You would think that this was the last turn, but it's definitely not. And so they play both a Colossus and a Daredevil. We do go ahead and skip. We are hoping for a Jubilee. Beautiful. So what can Jubilee pull into here? Jubilee can pull into our Electro. Horrible. Our Wave. Mediocre. It could pull into Magneto or Giganto. So we have 2 shots. 2 chances at some pretty decent cards. And actually, if they have a Professor X, they actually win here, because they could lock down this lane before ours triggers. They have the Professor X. Let's let them play it out. I think we should see it, but I am calling a Professor X, because then our Jubilee won't pull into a card to be able to. Oh no, so they play 2 cards. Oh, it's a Cosmo. Oh man, you're so mean. That's even worse than Professor X, honestly. And so at least we get the upside. We don't lose 8 cubes because there is the 1 additional turn here. So let's go ahead and retreat now. Let's go ahead and give them the good old thumbs up. You earned it type of win. Since they had initiative going into that last turn, their Cosmo did flip first, unfortunately. Had we drawn into our Electro ramp on 3, maybe this would have went differently. I liked the idea of locking everything down. But I think our deck is a little bit too high roll to do that. If we had a high impact 5-cost card, then I think we absolutely could have made it work. All right, and so next up we have Starscream for Ice Cream, or something a little bit dirtier depending on how you pronounce star or stars. But we're going to choose the innocent route. We think it is Starscream for Ice Cream. We're going to go ahead and drop our Sunspot onto the board in the far right lane. We plan on doing a Storm over in that location, depending on what we draw into. If we draw into our Electro, maybe we go with that instead, especially since Titan did pop up as one of the locations this turn. So it does exist, guys. Titan is out there. We don't have to worry that it is no longer just a myth. Clintar is kind of unfortunate as well, but I think we play our Electro. That will ramp us into 5 energy next turn. We can drop a 6-cost card at that point. Maybe we do something like a Magneto if they have a 3-cost card. Maybe we drop something better in like a Giganto, in Doctor Doom, Destroyer, which will kill this card and this card, but this card is destined to be pretty small this game, and so I think that is fine for us. Let's go ahead and drop our Destroyer. We're going to drop him over into the vault. And let's go ahead and snap. We have a lot of high-cost cards. It's going to be hard for them to compete with, so let's go ahead and push our advantage just a little bit here. Actually, what if we drew into our Giganto next turn? It's a 1 out of 5 chance. All right, so we're going to do the Destroyer. We'll probably play Magneto into Titan, and then hit him with an Arnim Zola on 6. Okay, never mind. They made the decision for us. So we drop Destroyer. It does kill all of our cards. We can actually pull all of their resources out of the vault with our Magneto here, which feels pretty good. It feels like the play line we want to go with. We can do Magneto into Clintar, pull all of those cards over here. We can then subvert Magneto's power back into the vault and back into Titan with the Arnim Zola. And so let's go ahead and lock that one in. Depending on what they drop this turn, they do have 5 energy this turn, so they can potentially drop a 6-cost card if that's what they want to go with. So if they go with a leader, That feels kind of bad. It will copy the Magneto over here, but it doesn't pull anything great, and we are going to be subverting that power level as well. Okay, so they have a Captain Marvel, which is not going to be enough to help them, I don't think. We're not planning on winning the Clintar lane. So let's go ahead and hit them with an Arnim Zola. We will push Magneto here and here. Oh no! Oh man. So that's going to be super weird. So Magneto is actually first going to pull Groot and Juggernaut here, and then it's going to pull them here afterwards. Are we okay with that amount of power? That brings them to 9. Captain Marvel would actually put them at 15. That's really, really rough. I think we got to do it. It's not going to be great because it's gonna make their Groot and Juggernaut dance all over. Victory. All over the place, ultimately leaving them in Titan. So if they played anything as much as 2 power, I think, in Titan, they would win this location. They're going to win this location by default because we were planning on moving the Juggernaut out and leaving only a 0 power Arnim Zola in that lane. I think we got kind of fortunate there, guys. That is not the playline that we necessarily needed or wanted. And maybe we need to tweak this deck a little bit. The Odin feels a little lackluster. The Dr. Doom feels a little bit lackluster as well. Maybe we'd be better off with a few other high power targets to hit instead of those. All right, and we are 2 in a row now for Titan. And so we do have Destroyer and Giganto. We can drop our wave on 3 to sneak out like an early Destroyer. Okay, so the Storm comes out, which is not incredibly great for us because that means that Iron Man is there. We're gonna have a hard time competing with that power level. They will actually be able to play power or cards into this lane for 2 turns, not just 1 as it makes it seem, but maybe they won't have enough low-cost cards to really invest many resources there is what I'm hoping for anyways. So let's go ahead and skip here. Okay, great. They don't drop anything. That is beautiful. And then we hope for the exact same thing this time around. I think we're going to drop our wave now. Next turn, that'll allow us to do maybe a Giganto or a Dr. Doom, and then we can do 1 on 5 and 6 as well. So we will be able to have 3 6 power cards out on the board. So they drop a Storm of their own, which is going to re-trigger that Storm lane. So they are going to be able to drop a 6 power card into the flooded location, which does feel pretty bad. I mean, we can perpetually keep it open with an Odin. We can re-trigger Wave and Storm, but I think that's just adding insult to injury. I don't think we even would get much upside out of it. I'm going to go ahead and play Giganto into Titan. We don't have the Infinite in hand, or else I would probably skip this turn. So Giganto is going to be a good runner-up card, and then we can hit that with an Arnim Zola, potentially, depending on what they drop here and how much power it pushes. And so 14 power actually wouldn't be able to come up over their 22 power in the lane. So we would have to do something like a Magneto to pull their Warp. Ooh, we can do a Magneto to pull their Warpath and their Storm out of that lane, which is phenomenal. That's going to leave just their Iron Man in the flooded location. That should make it pretty easy for us to lock it down. And then maybe we drop the Dr. Doom next turn. Maybe we hit an Arnim Zola and we can push Giganto here and here. It just really depends on how we finish out the rest of this draw. Ooh, so they skip this turn. So they're planning on an Infinite drop on turn 6, but we know that we have the flooded location locked down. Right now we have Sewer System and Titan. We did already snap, so they are going to at least forfeit 2 cubes here, potentially 4 if they continue to push, but I don't know that they do. Now that they realize how much power we have out on the board, I don't know that they continue to push it here. And so I think we go with the good average out play of the Dr. Doom that will add 5 power here, 5 here, 5 here. So even if they hit us with something like a leader, that's fine. If they skip this turn to buff up their Titan, that's fine. If they extend the game, that's fine as well. We have an Odin to re-trigger Dr. Doom. So let's see what they end up dropping here. So they drop the Infinite into the Titan lane, but that is not enough to swing the middle location or the far right lane because we did pull their cards out with the Magneto. Storm followed up with a Magneto is oftentimes a huge combo. It is almost more powerful than a Juggernaut because it can lead the opponent into a false sense of security. They think that they've won the lane, then all of a sudden you flood and cap out one of their other locations, and they lose one of the other locations in the process. Is always so much fun to see and so much fun to do. All right, so next up we have You Say Body Ah. And so we do have Storm in our starting hand. We do have Titan. That is 3 in a row. After going about 4 games with no Titan in sight, we now have it 3 times in a row, which is great. I love to see that. And then we do have Storm, but we don't want to storm this location because we do really enjoy this one. We built our deck around it and we want it to stay for a little while. So our Storm is actually not going to be able to trigger here, but I think that's okay. We're not going to be able to ramp up into a 6 cost drop next turn, but what we can do is drop a Jubilee to potentially pull into one of our 6 cost cards. Maybe it hits an Arnim Zola, which is kind of a low roll, because then it will duplicate either Storm or Jubilee across the board for some really crazy kind of antics. But nonetheless, I think we do drop the Jubilee into the Storm lane. We will have 1 additional turn to drop cards, but we're not going to have space to drop them because of the Green Goblin, which is not great. So if we now pull into Arnim Zola, it could double trigger on a Green Goblin, which feels kind of low roll as well. Ooh, so the Odin, oh my gosh. So the order of events here is that it's going to try to do Jubilee first, and then it will do Green Goblin, unfortunately. But it does send the Green Goblin right back their way for that -3 impact. So super funny interaction. And then we have Magneto, which could pull their Warpath over if we wanted to. We also have Giganto. So I'm guessing they probably have a Destroyer, maybe? And that's why they're running this one here. And they snapped. So I'm curious. I'm curious what they're going to be able to drop. They could do a Destroyer here, and if so, all we have to do is drop a Dr. Doom, finish this one out with another 5 power, and I think we're okay. Let's go ahead and snap back. I think we're in a pretty decent spot, especially if this is the kind of deck that I'm anticipating it to be. I think we're in a decent spot. I would anticipate maybe a Destroyer here. Okay, and so then they drop 1 card in mid, which could be the Destroyer, right? Because it's a 6 cost card. That is 16 power. That makes this one 6. But how do they lock down another lane is what I'm curious about. I don't think that they do. Yeah, I don't see any way that they can push more power. Because the 16 power, they have to follow up with another card here. Maybe they forgot this was Dark Dimension. If this is Destroyer, which I anticipate it was, they'd have to play something else here or else lock this down with like an Armor or a Professor X. But of course, we pushed high power here this turn or last turn. And so locking this one down would feel bad. This one is a loss now because they can't play power. Not a bad win. We are collecting on some cubes today. That is 6 wins. I guess that's 5 wins, 1 loss. Let's go ahead and play 1 more game to finish out the video. All right, so next up we have paper cuts. We do have our Electro, so we will be able to ramp on turn 3, and then we do get Titan, which is huge. We're going to be able to ramp on 3. We can do an Infinite, which, I mean, feels kind of bad because then we're going to skip on turn 4 anyways, even though we Electro ramp. So if we plan on going that route, maybe we end up going something like a Storm instead of the Electro play here. But if we plan on playing our cards naturally, then I definitely think it is more worthwhile to drop the Electro. All right, and so I am going to do the Electro. I think we play Destroyer into Kiln on turn 4 because I imagine they're going to want to drop a Mr. Negative. Seeing the Angela, it's either a Zoo or a Mr. Negative deck, most likely. So let's go ahead and do the Electro ramp. Next turn we'll do Destroyer, which will kill our Electro off, and we'll have a decent power push into the Kiln location, and we can always push more power over there with something like an Arnim Zola. Okay, and so we are going to lock in the Destroyer. We drew into Jubilee, but we probably won't end up playing it. That is more for games where we don't draw into something where we can ramp into our cards, either Wave or Electro. And so they Jubilee, which pulls into their Mr. Negative, which is pretty big. That's a pretty large play. But of course, we do have the massive 16 power Destroyer coming down. And then we have the discounted Dr. Doom. We also have Magneto, which I think is going to be able to be played here to help us cap out this location. So they snapped, but we're going to be able to pull their Bishop, Mr. Negative, and Jubilee. So even if they don't play cards into the Angela lane this turn, we're okay. I almost would want to play it into Nova Roma, but this guarantees that this lane will be capped out this turn no matter what. So let's go ahead and lock in the Magneto play. Okay, and so they do play into Nova Roma. So that's so unfortunate. They can... Oh my God. Okay, well, that is the game, guys. That is it. There's nothing more that they can do. I mean, I mean, there is, but there's no way that they can push enough power to overcome the Magneto in Titan. They can't play cards into Killing anymore. So even if they had a double, triple, quadruple Iron Man, they can't push that power across the lanes. And so very, very unfortunate. But the Magneto combination was so phenomenal, and it feels like such a satisfying way to end this video. I hope that you guys did enjoy it. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. I'm sure there are some tweaks that we can make to this deck list, but overall it feels pretty decent. Being able to kind of choose between those pieces of either power dispersion into different lanes, something like the Destroyer, the Infinite package, the Jubilee, the Magneto disruption has been phenomenal at forcing lanes to be capped out. And so overall, the deck list feels pretty good. Definitely try it out, make whatever tweaks you think are going to improve it, and let me know how it goes. And so as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you guys so much for continuing to come back and enjoy the content. This has been TLSG. Later, guys.